Now let's look at planning for financial flexibility and knowing your baseline. One of the biggest factors that holds many people back from making a career change is financial insecurity. In many cases, starting a new career can require a step down in pay. And most people live at the top of their income, meaning they spend all the money they make, and they don't save nearly enough. Sometimes not at all. And their expenses tend to be high. And this leaves them stuck where they have to choose between their dream position at a lower pay or a less than ideal position that pays the bills. So in the event that a person loses a job, often the concern is not having enough money in savings to sustain during an extended period of unemployment. And not only can this be financially straining, but often it leads the person to jump at the first employment opportunity that they can find out of a need for income, thwarting their efforts to select a position that moves their career goals forward. And so you have probably been through this. Most people go through this at some point where they just feel stuck. So the solution to both of these situations is to develop financial flexibility. And there are two factors to financial flexibility, and you need at least one of them in order to navigate a career change or even an unintentional loss of a position. So the first factor is having an emergency fund or a savings account. And I know it might sound like I'm beating a dead horse because everybody talks about this, but just think about this for a moment. We all know that we should have one, but most of us, at least here in America, do not have one. And we cannot tell you how much that you should save, but we can tell you that most recommendations are to have 3 to 6 months of your expenses saved, not your income, your expenses, and we'll get to that later. This way, you could go 3 to 6 months without a job and still cover your basic expenses. Now, unfortunately, many people don't even know what their expenses are. So in the worksheet that goes with this video, there's a simple form to use to calculate this, as well as your goal number for your emergency fund. But the activity doesn't just have you identify your total expenses. It has you look at your baseline expenses. Now, these are the absolute necessities and the bare bone minimum that you need to spend to ensure that your necessities are met. And this becomes much more approachable when you're coming up with a number of how much you need to save. So you'll be asking yourself, what expenses could be reduced in the event of an emergency, such as if I lost a job or during a period in which you were doing whatever it took to make a transition to your dream career. And then, in the event you find yourself in this position, you'll feel confident because you'll know how much that you need to make in order to cover your expenses, or that your emergency fund is going to last a certain amount of time, and it just sets you up to be in a better position to be able to make a transition. And so once you identify this lower version of your expenses, you can look at the second factor to developing financial flexibility, which is living below your means. So think about it. Lowering your expenses has two benefits. If you have lower expenses and you have the same income, then you can add more to your emergency fund, and you can add it and build it faster. And second, the lower your expenses are, the less you need to make on an ongoing basis. And this allows you to then also have the option of taking a lower paying position if needed in order to reach your career goals. So we've been in the position many times in our lives in which we had to consider whether to cancel our cable, which actually we did a decade ago, and it was one of the best decisions we ever made, but I digress. We've also cut out miscellaneous spending like eating out instead of eating at home, ordering $4 coffees instead of making our own, and we've even downgraded our living environment in the past in order to keep ourselves financially flexible so that we could take a new opportunity. At one point, we even lived in an extended stay motel the size of a shoebox for several months while we started our magazine. It was our ability to keep our expenses extremely low when we needed to that allowed us to pivot and to take risks and to create a business that we love. And you can do the same thing with your career. Some people even completely change their lifestyle in order to make it work, whether it's living in an RV, moving in with parents, getting roommates, selling their extra car, selling items that they own but that they don't use, and the list goes on and on and on. There's many ways to do this. And we aren't here to tell you how to live, but we're here to tell you that if you want flexibility to make a career change and experience the resulting increase in quality of life, you need to consider how you can increase your savings and/or decrease your expenses. And there's also one more method to increase your financial flexibility that doesn't necessarily involve you having to cut back on your expenses. You could just make more. And it doesn't mean through a job. I mean through a side hustle. And that's exactly what we're going to talk about next.